Quick heads up, I might be moving to Belgium for a few months. I need to learn French really quick. This video is sponsored by Babbel, and yeah, I do use it. More about that later. Is war with Russia closer than you think? Novara Media certainly seems to think so. So is their video on this topic correct, or are they lying? Well, if this is a Ryan McBeth video, well, how about I don't spoil it here? Short answer, there was this movie called Being the Ricardos, which is about the relationship between Lucille Ball and Ricky Ricardo on the set of the TV show I Love Lucy from the 1950s. And there was a subplot in the movie that Lucy had become a communist, was being investigated for it, because back in the 1950s it was very dangerous to be a communist. And Lucy's excuse was that she checked the wrong box on her voter registration form. Ricky Ricardo, who had come from Cuba, was really upset with her because he fled Cuba because of the communists, and he gets very mad and goes, "Lucy, you checked the wrong box!"
I was chased to this country, Lucy! Believe me, you checked the wrong box.
So there are honest mistakes like checking the wrong box, and then there are mistakes like intentionally checking the wrong box, or even making the box yourself and checking it.
How dare you say whatever you said?
And this video from Novara Media checks the wrong box. I travel to NATO headquarters in Brussels pretty regularly. One thing you learn fast is that English will get you through Europe, but it won't get you respect. Now, Belgium has two official languages, Flemish and French. Brussels mainly speaks French. So I started learning French, and I chose Babbel because I don't want games, I want something that actually works. And you can actually select your learning path. And in my case, I selected business French. I already know how to order a baguette. Je voudrais un baguette s'il vous plaît. That's easy enough. Babbel is an award-winning language app designed by over 200 language experts. It's like having a private tutor in your pocket. I like that Babbel allows me to practice real conversations with an AI partner because that's what I actually need so I don't sound like an idiot in a meeting. Stuff like la Disinformation, Russia, Ukraine, augmenté de 20%. Babbel has over 25 million subscriptions sold and 1.6 million five-star reviews. And yeah, that checks out. So if you want to start speaking a new language in like 3 weeks, click the link in the description below. Go to babbel.com/McBeth to get up to 55% off your subscription. That's babbel.com/McBeth to get up to 55% off. Long answer is there are a lot of facts wrapped in fear and framing and speculation laundering and bad math and at least one flat out false claim, all designed to push you emotionally before you've had time to think. So let me walk through how this works. And now that I think of it, the short answer was longer than the long answer. But a lot of new viewers might be watching this. So hi, I'm Ryan McBeth. I'm a software engineer, and I use my software skills to track Russian disinformation campaigns. And frankly, the video I'm about to review is full of manufactured lies that were pulled straight from the pro-Russia playbook. If you want to support me in my work, or get notified of new videos immediately instead of whatever the hell YouTube is doing today, go to ryanbeth.substack.com. You can also watch my videos there without ads. And if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button so you can get notified for new videos. Let's start with the very first line, where they open with fear, not facts. This video opens with:
Europe is ramping up for war. Entire economies, including the UK's, are being restructured in favor of defense and preserving the US's commitment to the NATO alliance. Now, the reason we're given is the possibility of war with Russia. But that raises the question, what would a war between Russia and Europe even look like? And would you survive it?
That's not analysis. That's what we in the business, the intel business, call threat priming. This is a persuasion tactic where you activate fear before you give evidence. Once you're emotionally engaged, you're more likely to accept weak claims later. Notice what's missing here. No probabilities, no timelines, no definition of what war even means. A border incident is not the same as a NATO-Russia shooting war. A cyber incident is not the same thing as a nuclear exchange. And if you want to get technical, America has been at war with Russia since 2014. Or even, you could say, since the presidential elections of 2016. So next, the video turns planning into deployment. There's this line.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer has moved his promise to put British boots on the ground in Ukraine to its operational phase.
That wording matters. Operational phrase sounds like troops are getting loaded onto planes. Military's Plan all the time. Planning is not execution. Operational planning is not an order to deploy. I guarantee you the U.S. has an O plan, an operational plan to invade Canada, even if Canada's our ally. At least I think they're our allies. Kyla, are we still allies?
You haven't invaded us yet, but don't try it. We burned your house down once, and we'll do it again.
Oh, yeah, all right, thanks. So this is how narratives work. You inflate the planning language into imminent action. Next, we're told that the EU, the European Union rearm plan means war in 5 years.
European countries are also getting serious about a confrontation with Russia, unveiling an 800 billion euro plan to rearm the continent. Within 5 years, Danish intelligence warns.
This 800 billion euro figure refers to financing mechanisms spread over time across multiple countries. Calling this a frantic race for arms is editorializing. It's not real analysis. You can't frantically build a factory, right? Especially in the EU, where there's all sorts of regulations, dude. There's no frantically building a factory in the EU. And if there was a countdown to war, that's on Russia. They can always just, leave Ukraine, and this war is over. There would be no need for a vast rearmament. Then the certainty kind of ramps up with "it's just a matter of time" trope.
It's just a matter of time, with a major war perhaps just around the corner.
You know, in my novel, The Wind Machine, which is available as a signed copy on Bunker Branding, on Amazon, and on Audible if you're a Marine, I talk about probability collapse. And this kind of shows it without any evidence, where this guy kind of goes from probability to plausibility to inevitability with zero new evidence. And this is how fear kind of accelerates, right? Where's the evidence that says war is just a matter of time? This is on Russia, right? Russia started this thing. Russia could always leave. Just recently, the New York Times had an article that detailed Russia's brutality with its soldiers to the point where soldiers with stage 4 cancer were being sent back for frontline assaults. Does that sound like an army that's winning? And don't get me wrong, just because Russia is losing doesn't mean Ukraine is winning. Both sides can still lose. There are a lot of people who kind of forget that when Russia failed to capture Kyiv, this became a contest of not winner and loser. This became a contest of loser and more loser.
Loser.
Who loses more? That is the real contest here. So then we're told...
And as Europe gears up its security against Russia, experts have identified 4 geographical axes where the bloc would likely fortify its defenses.
Which experts? From where? Using what assumptions? This is authority without attribution. This is a common persuasion tactic. Next is the theory that the buildup is provocation, and this.
But the buildup of European forces at any of these locations right on the doorstep of Russian territory would likely, almost certainly, be seen as a provocation by Russia. Just imagine Russia did the same to us. We would see it as a provocation. We would freak out.
Almost certainly is doing a lot of work here. You're being told how Russia will interpret events without evidence, and then you're kind of walked through this moral symmetry argument that kind of flattens context. So this is getting into this whole NATO expansion threatens Russia trope. The fact is that NATO has had troops on the Russian border since 2004, when Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia joined NATO. In fact, during that time, we've never invaded Russia. And actually, technically, I guess Norway touches Russia way up north. They've been on the border with Russia since NATO was started in 1949. So, NATO has never invaded Russia. Gee, I wonder why. Probably it's because NATO is a defensive alliance, not an offensive alliance. And if Russia's claim here is that, they attacked Ukraine because NATO was getting too close, they did a crappy job, because them attacking Ukraine made Sweden and Finland join NATO. NATO never asked Sweden and Finland to join. Russia convinced those two countries to join. So you might want to close that loop there, Vlad. Next thing that's kind of misleading are lines in the video regarding a possible invasion of the Baltics.
But at the standard estimate of one military occupier for every 50 inhabitants, just 60,000 Russian soldiers would be enough to subdue the 3 million inhabitants of these two countries.
Oh yeah, this is making a lot of assumptions there. The ratio of one soldier for every 50 inhabitants comes from this whole counterinsurgency stabilization model, not actual invasion warfare. And this model also assumes zero NATO response. They're just talking about troop numbers. And when you look at NATO's very significant air power, that could likely destroy the Russian Air Force in about 36 hours. And you kind of start realizing this is a blatant lie. I mean, we saw what we could do to Venezuelan air defenses, which were Russian-owned, in less than 2.5 hours. Russia wouldn't fare that much better using their systems. And where is anyone getting 60,000 Russian troops from? They are currently bogged down in Ukraine. To top it all off, if Russia did move 60,000 troops from occupied Ukraine to attack Latvia, Ukraine would, or Estonia, now I think of it, Ukraine would make gains in the sectors where Russia left. This is intentionally using misleading language to manipulate you into thinking an invasion of the Baltics would be easy. I was just in Estonia. Believe me, it would not be easy. The Estonians do not want the Russians there. This video then goes on to claim...
Research by the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft assesses that Russian forces could quickly overwhelm those of the Baltic states, shown here in green. The combined forces of the eastern states, those in light blue, which include Poland and the Nordic states, would be outnumbered 3-1.
Now, this is pulled from, I don't know, some kind of scenario-based modeling, but the assumptions aren't really explained. Worst-case scenarios are not predictions. You know, sometimes you meet someone on the internet who knows what they're talking about. Today is your day, buddy, and that person is me.
Jesus Christ.
Ryan McBeth. I was just in Estonia at a military base. You need a key card to get into every single door except the bathroom, mainly because the Russians are right next door. These guys, the Estonians, are so prepared to fight Russia, it's freaking unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And they do not like Russia for how they treated them when Russia ruled over Estonia during the Cold War. So whenever someone says a claim like quickly overwhelm, okay, how? How do they quickly overwhelm? How do you do logistics? You have 3 rail lines going to the Baltics, Tallinn, Vilnius, and Riga. So 3 axes of advance with logistics supplied by rail that'll be pummeled day and night by NATO air power. I mean, Russia has maybe 450 to 550 combat aircraft, and we're not talking about stuff like trainers and cargo aircraft. Russia couldn't even gain air superiority over Ukraine. And Ukraine only had about 125 combat aircraft at the start of the invasion. NATO, just in Europe, has about 1,800 to 2,000 fighter aircraft. And I did that calculation without using any US or Turkish aircraft. So I'm giving Europe the benefit of the doubt here. If you think NATO is going to let Russia walk into the Baltics when we have almost 4-1 air superiority over them, you haven't been paying attention to how Russian aircraft have been performing. Russia would be crushed, most likely within about 36 hours. It would be what we did against Venezuela on steroids. Russia's logistics would be dominated. Russia might have more troops than Latvia and Lithuania and Estonia, but they don't have as many airplanes, and it's airplanes that perform these deep strikes to destroy logistics. NATO would dominate Russia in the air, even without the US, and also NATO has the F-35, which showed its worth over the skies of Iran. What kind of air defense system was Iranian using? They were using Russian air defense systems. Then there's this line about fragmented access.
Without NATO, the current centralized and American-led command structure of the armed forces of its member states dissolves. That leaves Europe with 29 fragmented national armies without a centralized command structure, significantly weakening their ability to quickly mount a coordinated response to threats.
This ignores NATO's command structure and coalition doctrine. This is bureaucracy doom framing, and it's designed to make Europe seem helpless. The fact is that NATO has an established chain of command. In fact, in a recent New York Times article, it mentioned how Secretary of War Pete Hegseth was going to fire this American general until he realized that a European general would lead NATO in Europe. Look, man, we know how to run a chain of command, right? NATO knows how to run a chain of command. Next, I want to talk about hybrid attacks and whether the truth matters. Now we get accusations.
Russia is also thought to be behind this massive blaze at Warsaw's largest shopping mall in May last year, with politicians calling the fire part of an operation to destabilize the country.
Followed immediately by this.
Look, whether or not Russia was actually involved in those events or whether it commits future hybrid attacks of this kind doesn't really matter.
This is the most dangerous line in the entire video. The truth doesn't matter. Verification doesn't matter. Only perception matters. That is propaganda logic, not analysis. I mean, I think we can say with a reasonable amount of confidence that Peru didn't conduct these attacks. Right? Like, I feel like the church lady from Saturday Night Live here. Who could it be now? Who could it be? Could it be?
Who could it be? Who could it be? I just can't imagine who. Could it be?
Russia? Well, isn't that special? And the fact is that the Gerasimov doctrine is an established doctrine for hybrid warfare. The Gerasimov doctrine is what Russia practices. And actually, this video, the video that was made by Novara Media, that is a playbook from the Gerasimov doctrine. When an adversary publishes their doctrine and then starts doing stuff from that doctrine, you can probably assume they're following their doctrine.
Surprise, mother...
Russia. Then come these big numbers.
Pentagon officials believe that as many as half of Ukrainian airstrikes miss their targets due to Russian GPS jamming, with other forms of electric warfare knocking out up to 10,000 Ukrainian drones every month.
No time frame, no system specified, no sources cited. I have no idea what the hit probability is when a Ukrainian drone is fired into Russia. It's not 100%, but it's not 0% either. Now, this is statistical intimidation. I don't know how many Ukrainian airstrikes are missing. Nobody really does except the Ukrainians and American intelligence officials. But Russia certainly isn't giving those numbers out, right? The next thing is kind of a weird claim. I guess the idea is that the whole idea here is that the West is no better than Russia because the West uses cyber weapons as well. The video says,
the US also considered cyber weapons to disable Libya's air defenses when it overthrew Muammar Gaddafi in 2012.
Now, Operation Odyssey Dawn, which now that I think of it does kind of sound like a Crosby, Stills and Nash B-side, occurred in 2011, not 2012. This is a basic fact. I'm actually not that upset about this one. Sometimes people misspeak. I misspeak all the time. I've transposed numbers and dates or dollar figures. But this isn't really misspeaking. It's someone on the production team knew when this actual operation was, and they never even bothered to look it up. And I guess they're kind of hoping that you don't either, because it would damage their credibility. And then this is followed by this guy saying,
in the end, it decided to use conventional bombs to cripple and destroy the country.
I mean, that is moral editorializing, not really a technical description. Then there's this claim about Palantir.
And US company Palantir, co-founded by Trump acolyte Peter Thiel, has sold its algorithmic recognition software for use by the Western ally Israel in its genocide against Palestinians in Gaza.
Okay, I'm picking up what you're putting down there, bub. Genocide is a legal term. Presenting it as settled fact without a ruling is advocacy, not analysis. Now, I did an entire video series where I interviewed Israeli soldiers to ask them what went wrong. You can find that below. One common thread from IDF soldiers was frustration with their rules of engagement, meaning they were upset that they couldn't use force when they wanted to use force. They were actually restricted from using force against Palestinians. If Gaza was a genocide, Israel doesn't know how to genocide. They weren't really putting up Genghis Khan numbers here. So whenever I hear the word genocide, I immediately become suspicious that that person has an agenda. And this kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of who is this organization? Who is Navara Media? Why would they say Israel genocide? So I actually looked them up. And it's kind of interesting. They are reported to have a mixed factuality rating and a left-leaning bias. They're owned by a company called Thousand Hands Limited, a not-for-profit company, and they have taken money from the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, which is affiliated with the Democratic Socialist Left Party. Ah, dude, all right, I'm picking up what you're putting down. I guess they also promote this thing called luxury communism, which, I mean, I don't know, maybe it means warmer gulags. But again, the point here isn't to really make fun of them. It's to show that these people have an agenda. And telling the truth is not part of that agenda. West bad, Russia good. Got it. Now, later we get some stories about electromagnetic pulse, which is kind of a real weird part of the video, because it's obvious the speaker doesn't understand what electromagnetic pulse is or how it works.
One such weapon became an object of speculation early last year.
Cryptic warning from the House Intelligence Committee chairman.
Referring to a foreign military capability.
Russian nukes in space.
So again, they're talking about electromagnetic pulse. A nuclear weapon detonated in the upper atmosphere above Europe would also affect Kaliningrad and probably St. Petersburg. But they kind of charge ahead with the whole EMP effects of nuclear weapons. I made a video on how electromagnetic pulse works. You're not going to win this over me there, bub.
So I think it's pretty safe to assume everyone has those capabilities now.
Now, then it jumps to the US, USSR testing EMP weapons to everyone without justification. What are we talking about again? This is very weird because I don't understand the point that this brings up. This is like a global capability or something. Yes, any country with a nuclear weapon could launch it up into the air and have it detonate in the atmosphere and create an electromagnetic pulse. Okay, you just discovered physics. Awesome. Now here is a clear factual mistake. It is a nuclear numbers error.
According to recent assessments, Russia has the world's largest stock of nuclear weapons, with nearly 1,200 intercontinental missiles, 800 submarine missiles, and almost 600 jet-launched atomic bombs.
That number only refers to warheads, not missiles. Missiles do not equal warheads. This is simply wrong. According to the Congressional Research Service, Russia has about 330 intercontinental ballistic missiles. This is compared with about 400 operational Minuteman III missiles that the United States possesses. Russia also has 192 submarine-launched ballistic missiles compared to America's 280 Trident II missiles. Now, more than one warhead can be placed on a missile. So maybe that's where they got their number from, or maybe they're lumping in gravity bombs with missile warheads. But saying Russia has 1,200 ICBMs is either a lie or bad fact-checking. Both of those things are bad. Now we get to the whole nuclear apocalypse imagery from this damn fiction writer, Annie Jacobsen. I did a video about her and her blatant lies as well. She wrote this horribly inaccurate book on nuclear war, and I cover this in a video I did about her book. You can watch that video at the link below. It's pretty bad.
After nuclear war, the survivors would envy the dead. Most people have lost everything and everyone they know.
And you know, when Annie Jacobsen's book came out, there were so many inaccuracies in it. I actually speculated that it was Russian propaganda, mainly because there was this massive chapter on nuclear winter. And the whole nuclear winter concept was a disinformation campaign funded by Russia designed to get US Pershing II missiles out of Europe. This video parrots some of the same talking points. The biggest issue that this video ever addresses is how a nuclear war starts. That's kind of your biggest clue that this is a Russian propaganda video. They never talk about how the war starts. They just say, oh my God, nuclear war. Okay, what are Russia's battlefield objectives? What are their desired effects? If you can't name those two things, you're not a defense expert. You are fear-mongering. And in order to understand nuclear weapons, you have to think in terms of effectors, not weapons. When you buy a drill, do you buy a drill because you want a drill, or do you buy a drill because you want a hole? Look, I'm sure there's some people who collect drills, but most people buy a drill because they want a hole. So the drill is the effector on the wall or wherever you're putting the hole. So why do you build a nuclear weapon? Well, normally people build a nuclear weapon as a deterrent. If you attack me, I will use this special weapon. This is why North Korea built their nuclear stockpile. But why would Russia use a nuclear weapon on the battlefield to initiate this sort of nuclear war scenario? In order to answer that, you have to understand Russia's objective. Why did Russia invade Ukraine? It wasn't because of bioweapons labs or Nazis or those naughty Ukrainians wouldn't let people speak Russian. It was because Russia's geography is weird. They have this massive land border that is perfect for invasion and essentially zero large terrain features like rivers or mountains to stop outside invaders. Russia is irrationally paranoid about being invaded. The West has no intention of invading Russia, but for some reason it's always at the top of their heads. So if Russia invades Ukraine and annexes Ukraine, they get the Carpathian Mountains on their southwestern flank. If then they take the Baltics, then they take Poland, because Poland has mountains in the south that can protect it. So you take this giant Russian border and you shrink it down to like only defending 200, 220 miles, something like that. That was the original plan. Take Ukraine in 3 days, install a favorable government in Belarus, and then in a few years, once Russia fractured NATO with disinformation operations like this, then they do the rest of the plan. Then they take Estonia, then they take Poland. The operation didn't take 3 days. Now we're in the 4th year of the war. So now this is basically Russia's Vietnam. The goals have changed since the objective at the start of the war. So what is the goal now? Well, you know how America kept fighting in Vietnam because no president wanted to be the guy who lost Vietnam? They just kind of kicked the can down the road, even when it was obvious that the Vietnam War was unwinnable? Russia is now in this weird situation. They can't stop the war because the second they do, their economy collapses. And President Putin would be deposed by oligarchs who helped fund the war. And his deposement would be a rather violent deposement. Now, rule number one of being a dictator is to stay in power. Logically, that is the best option for Russia. Continue the war in the hopes that the West will eventually stop supporting Ukraine and Ukraine collapses and they can use the wealth of Ukraine to kind of give themselves a soft economic landing. Videos like this one from Novara Media are part of the information war campaign designed to reduce support for Ukraine in the hopes that Ukraine will collapse before Russia. Both Russia and Ukraine are heading toward collapse, but the West is propping up Ukraine to prevent them from collapsing. So now that you have this information, how does a nuclear weapon allow Russia to meet their new objective of continuing the war with Ukraine until it collapses? You could say, well, the use of a nuclear weapon would collapse Ukraine. Okay, if that's the case, why the heck hasn't Russia used one? Well, mainly it's because China told Russia not to. China is likely to invade Taiwan in 2027 or 2028. They do not want the United States to use a nuclear weapon against their landing forces. Full stop. If Russia used a nuclear weapon against Ukraine, it makes the likelihood of the United States using a nuclear weapon against a Chinese beachhead a lot greater. And China does not want that. And considering the only reason Russia can afford this war is because China is buying Russian oil, Russia is now China's bitch. If Russia disobeys China, China can just stop buying their oil. And then Russia does collapse before Ukraine. So when people say, oh my God, nuclear war, ask them, is the nuclear war in the room with us right now? Because the only reason this war can continue is that China essentially allows it to continue by buying Russian oil. And China will not allow Russia to use a nuclear weapon, or they will cut off the oil. Finally, we get the whole trope of the military-industrial complex.
So who does all this escalation serve? Well, politicians first. But the main winners, and they're always the main winners, are arms manufacturers and their shareholders.
And you know, this whole military-industrial complex thing might be emotionally satisfying, but it's asserted, it's not demonstrated. And you know what? Russia has arms manufacturers too. I did a video about 2 years ago where I proved that the military-industrial complex does not exist. I proved it mathematically with numbers, with revenue, with stock prices. At the time, Procter & Gamble made more money than the top 5 defense contractors. You know, a company that sells diapers made more money than like Lockheed Martin and all the top 5 defense contractors. Not a single person has proven those numbers wrong. Not one. In fact, now it's 2026. I should do another video to see if anything has changed. Look, the fact is that this video from Novara, it mixes facts with fear framing and sloppy math and anonymous authority and speculation stated as certainty. And that's how the Gerasimov doctrine and persuasion works in 2026. Novara Media should be ashamed of themselves for putting out what is frankly paid for propaganda crap with zero sourcing. And that's right, I show all of my sources. Either find it below or find it at ryanbeth.substack.com. This is why I'm so poor. This is why I beg for money on Substack from individuals. My life would be so much more comfortable if I could just lie online. It would solve all my freaking problems. So my advice to Novara Media is keep checking the wrong box there, bub.
Call it.
I'll be waiting every time you do.
Need to call it. I can't call it for you.
You want to support capitalism? Head over to ryanbeth.substack.com. Grab some of my novels like Lies to Rule Men or The Wind Machine at amazon.com. You can also get my Intel Life t-shirt from Bunker Branding. Thank you guys so much for watching.
In the modern age of progress and preparedness, one thing separates the professional from the amateur: appearance. That's why forward-thinking Americans choose Bunker Branding Apparel, the official uniform of those who get things done. Each shirt is precision-engineered and field-tested under rigorous conditions such as extended YouTube filming operations, Substack editorial duty, and the occasional internet argument. Designed for comfort, durability, and undeniable sense of tactical cool. So remember, citizens, when you're defending democracy, refueling freedom, or simply mowing the strategic lawn, Bunker Branding keeps you mission-ready, wrinkle-free, and unmistakably American.